Running with Maverick and Wolfman. Welcome back, guys, for another episode. How was the wine glass?
It was good. It was painful, but that was expected.
As predicted.
Um, as predicted. But no, I was pleased. It was hard. It got pretty separated there at the beginning, so I basically ran by myself the whole way.
That must have been nice to get that kind
What's
of
that?
quality time to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to when you're trying to push yourself like that, it's hard to do when there's nobody around. But
There's nothing better than racing completely by yourself trying to get a good time.
I know. I tell you what, though, it's kind of like you said. I hit a pace and I just stay there. Started at like 6:30, then I dropped to like 6:18s for a while, then 6:25 for a while, but I was within that window the whole time. But I ran the fastest half marathon I've run since 2011, so
That's great.
must have done something right.
That's great. As we are getting back into shape and into runs, it's interesting. But I finally had what I consider a good week where I felt pretty good. My legs were moving a little better. I don't know, something just clicked. And my buddy was asking me about marathoning, right? And I said, my plan was to run one this year, but I'm not sure that I want to run one this year because there's a difference between running and racing. And I have
That's
trouble
true.
just running. I have if I get into that marathon, I'm going to want to race, and I'm not sure that my body's going to be ready for that. So I've never even raced a 10K. Now that I think about it, I've done lots of 8Ks, 5Ks, 5 milers, everything short. I never did the 10K even.
This is what you got to do in your preparation for your marathon. Lay out your plan, and you do a 5K. The next month, you do a 10K. Then you do a half, and then you do your full. Separate them by a month.
Right, but I might want to do like 5 5Ks, 5 10Ks. I'm finally feeling good. So, like I
Couple
said, I might.
15Ks in there.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like I'm finally getting back into shape, so I might have a completely different opinion 6 months from now. But right now, last week, if you asked me, I would have been like, I don't feel prepared at all to do this. But now I'm feeling better, so I'm kind of on the fence. But if I get into it, I'm going to want to race it, and that's what the hard part is because if you're not prepared for that, you're going to run a good 20 and then suffer through a 10K.
If you're starting to feel good, you should jump in fun runs right now, like Halloween themed 5Ks. There's always Thanksgiving stuff. You should hop into one of those and race it. See how you do.
Well, I'm not going to be fast. I mean,
Well, you never know.
I
There's
would
still a month
maybe I would surprise
away.
myself, but I mean, I'm still feeling better. I'm getting quicker, but I'm still not in prime conditioning or anything like that. I wouldn't think I'd be anywhere near a PR right now. I'll put it that way.
I got you. Yeah, makes sense. But you shouldn't be near a PR right now, anyway.
Yeah,
You
yes, I
know.
should. It's just that
Oh
runner's
man.
mentality. You're always shooting for that PR, whether you're in shape or not. You're thinking about it, like it's in the back of your mind when you enter the race.
Yeah,
This is where I should be or could be. And in reality, it's
yeah.
like
This is
you're
where I
nowhere near
used to be.
that.
I'm a mile behind myself.
That's what it is. You're racing and you're not ready
I'm a
yet.
mile behind the 25-year-old man. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we all go through it. Took me a long time to realize you could run events just for fun, you know?
I would say I had a lot of fun running practice runs and workouts and things like that. But there were some times where you're a bit miserable. I
I don't know what you're talking about.
remember going out for a night run after a clinical, and one of our teammates was running with me, and for some reason we didn't take any headlamps, which is really dumb, but we had no light and the road was really dark. And you know how like cars come up and they kind of blind you for a second when the
Oh,
lights come up, like you, so
oh,
you
yeah.
can see, and then all of a sudden you can't see anything at all. So these cars are coming by us, no big deal. And like I said, we're dumb and young, so we were doing no headlamps, no reflective stuff, just running. And all of a sudden, this one car comes up, And right before I got blinded by the lights, I saw this big tree limb across the road. So I can't go left because he's on my left. I can't go right because the car is there. So I had to jump over this tree limb. And he jumps, I jump. Mine was like, it was way too big to clear. This thing was huge. I couldn't clear it. I just wrecked on it and luckily rolled like on the road without getting hit by the car. What were we thinking? Like, we should have had headlamps and we would have seen that and just stopped for a second or something, not done that. That was worse than biting in the
Yeah.
steeple pit.
Remember the time, I think it was the mansion loop, and usually it cut through this like path, and we decided we were just going to keep going. A bunch of people turned around, and we tried to cross this creek, and there was nowhere to cross it. So we ended up going through it. I mean, we're talking, it had to be. So, we're trying to cross this creek and there's nowhere to cross it. So eventually we just go through it. And it was cold. It was like snowy and everything else. It was like February. So that was really not smart. And coach wasn't too happy when we got back. I mean, he was happy we got back, but we should have turned around with everybody else. But it was one of those like, we've already come this far. It's shorter to just cross this creek and instead of turning all the way back. But in reality, I think it took us longer to figure out where to cross this creek than just turning around. But yeah, young and stupid.
I think I found a way to cross it, but you guys just didn't wait long enough.
Positive. I remember thinking when we got done, anybody watching that from like a helicopter, of like watching these heat signatures would have been like, what are these people doing? Because we ran up and down the creek, I don't know how many times before we finally were like, here looks good. Boop.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah. You know what? I actually ran into somebody. They brought that up, that how you guys did that. And they were talking to me about it. And I was like, yeah, I remember that. That was not a good idea. That was just dangerous.
it was a terrible idea. I mean, at least none of us were alone.
Yeah. It went
That's what they
well
tell
for
me.
how dumb it was.
I've got a question from a listener.
Well, before we get into that, did you get any positive or negative feedback from the jackal?
He hasn't, I think he's scared. He hasn't responded yet.
He's intimidated.
He is. I don't know if he's listened yet or not. I think he has. I haven't talked to him yet today, though. So I think he's scared.
He's doing mileage. He's
He's trying to.
He's listening to the podcast, doing mileage, getting
prep.
prepared.
He's gonna, next time he comes in, he's gonna be like, "We're racing now."
Yeah, he's like motivation.
Oh, that's funny. But mom agrees with you. I didn't do a good impression of her, so I'm gonna have to work on that.
I don't think that's what she meant.
You might be right, but I'm still gonna work on it.
Yeah, you should probably work on it. Did you hit the wall in the half marathon? Is that a thing? Like, do you hit the wall in the half, or is it just a marathon?
I mean, I don't know if anybody ever talks about a wall in the half, but definitely the last mile was tough. Like I felt like I wasn't moving, but I was.
Let me ask you this.
I actually closed.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
In all the training, regiments and things that I've been researching and reading and listening to, when you run a half marathon, you train and run up to the half marathon, maybe beyond that distance, right? But when you're training for the marathon, you don't run the marathon distance. Is that absolute, or are there guys that actually will run 26 or longer in preparation for the marathon?
Yeah, there's guys that'll do it and longer. I don't. When I get to that point, I focus more on the time. Okay, I'm going to run for 3 hours because that's what I'm anticipating hitting. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
you always go a little faster.
There's a lot about tempo runs and threshold runs and doubling up and doing all kinds of different workouts in preparation to get you there to be ready for the marathon, but not actually running that distance. But then it carries you through because you're running these faster events. Like like I said, you're racing some 5Ks, 10Ks, half, you're running faster. So then it helps you run that slower pace for a longer distance. So, I mean, I get the premise behind it. And I was just wondering if you had any experience with people who are running beyond that in order to prepare for it.
I think the closest I ever come is about 23 miles. because then at that point, what's three more? You know what I mean? Like
a 5K.
which then you could say, yeah, it's well, yeah. But then you could say on the other hand, like, why not just do three more? You've already done 23. But I don't know.
I've already
I know
run
people,
this far. Why don't I just keep going?
yeah. I just kept running. But
The irony is that if you run long enough and you run on the road, you will get that reference thrown out at you on a regular basis.
oh yeah, for sure. You sent it to me the other day.
I think the last time that someone called me Forrest, I was like, how do they know my name?
Oh, that's great. No, I know people that have and do go that full marathon or further to prepare for it. I just never have.
You know what?
Yeah.
Since we've been talking about marathoning, I've come to the conclusion that I know a lot less about marathons than I thought I did.
Oh yeah.
You know what I
I'll
mean?
tell you
Like
what.
being a runner for all these years, being
Yeah,
around runners, being around marathoners, and discussing things, and then I was like, you know what? There's a lot to learn.
it is different because really, unless you're going to be in that lead pack, you are racing yourself.
I'm always racing myself, though.
I'm always hiding from my own shadow. I don't know. I've always felt better after everyone. Like the soreness didn't last as long, even when I wasn't as prepared. The first one I ever did, I didn't want to see stairs for like a month. And then they just get better each time. Even the last one I did, I was like, yeah, I'm sore, but I'll live.
That was
It's
good.
weird. Yeah. Yeah, man.
All right. I had maybe one other thing to ask you. Oh, how were your feet running in those little slippers you had on?
And my five fingers,
Yeah, your
no
little
more,
socks you had
no
on covered with the little
different.
treads.
No real different than any other day. They're a newer pair, so they're a little snug yet. They haven't worn in, so they were a little tight at points, but not terrible. But the
How are
other
your
ones I had,
calves?
they were fine. I've run further than that in them, just not at that velocity. Usually would not get a newer pair of shoes like that before a race, but the other ones I had worn huge holes in the bottom of them, and so I had been running in them for about 2 weeks with these holes in the bottom, and I said, "Geez, I should really get a new pair if I want to run fast and have shoes at the end of this thing." So usually I would have worn them in a little bit more before I ran something like that, but other than being a little tight, they were fine. They feel good.
Did you see a lot of other half marathoners wearing five finger
I did
shoes?
see a couple people wearing the five fingers. I was one of like two people in the staging area with Hey Dudes on, and I was sure people were wondering if I was gonna run in those, but I didn't. I changed into
Good,
something more ridiculous.
good for you.
But no,
Would
there were a couple people wearing them.
Were you the fastest five finger wearer?
I think so.
Five finger wearer.
Five finger wearer. I think so, but I wouldn't put money on it.
There's some dude out there that's just slipping them on right now, going, "I'm going to beat this guy's time in these
Yeah.
things."
Yeah. One time I was in a race. This was several years ago, and I had a bigger beard at the time, and I ran through, and I was in good shape at that point. And some guy's like, "Oh, you're the first finisher with a beard," and I was like, I find that hard to believe. I'm in like the 50-ish range, like I'm not near the top 10 or top 15 or anything. I find it hard to believe that in November nobody else had a beard. So I think he was just not paying attention. A few too many Bloody Marys in. Nobody's ever said anything to me about the five fingers though.
No.
So no, I'm actually surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we had that one race where that kid wore those Converse All Stars for the cross country meet, and that was
Yeah.
a big topic of conversation. How good is he going to be? How's he
Yeah.
going to get through the
Yeah.
forest? How's he going to remember that? He was pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, I mean, one time I was at a race with a guy, and it's a road race. It wasn't a triathlon or anything like that, right? And it was just a 5K, so it's not even like it was a longer distance. And it was cold. It was in like mid-February in upstate New York, and it was snowing like crazy. And my buddy's like, "Who do you think is going to win this race?" And I was like, "That guy over there." And he's like, "How do you know that?" He's in bicycle shorts. He's going to win. And so we got done and he won it. And my buddy's like, "How'd you know he was going to win?" I said, "Listen, you don't come to a 5K road race in bicycle shorts unless you're ready to win." There was no bike involved. He didn't even bike there. I don't understand it.
He just got off the bike.
Uh, I don't know. Maybe.
He probably swam in the snow, then biked in the snow, and then it was like, I'm finishing up with my run.
Maybe it's the warmest pair of shorts he had, but I don't know. But there I am in like a pair of tights, a pair of shorts, or yeah, a pair of tights, a pair of shorts, a pair of pants, like 3 shirts, a windbreaker on, a hat, and maybe 2 pairs of gloves. My buddy is in a singlet and short shorts. That's it. Like you're an animal.
Yeah, that's funny. Get your bike shorts ready.
I'm gonna wear a cup on my next race.
What's your long run up to?
Uh I did 18
Last
couple
week.
weeks ago. Yeah, was it last week? Yeah. And then next week will be the next one. And I think that's 20. I think. I'd have to look.
What's your question for me?
So, question from a listener. Let me find it here. Question from the listener. What do you think about target heart rate training for running? I'm more used to just going out, running hard pretty much every day. I know they do it differently now in cross country. What are your thoughts?
I never got into the target heart rate. I always ran on feel. So if coach said to, you know, go 3/4 effort, that's what I would try to do. If coach said hit a 64 on this next quarter, I did a 64 in the next quarter. Like whatever we were trying to accomplish is what I went, and I went based on feel. So I might run the 64 good or bad. I might do the first half in 30 and then 34 or vice versa, just depending on how I felt. If I felt crappy in the first 200, I ran a crappy 200 and then I came home fast. So it would just come down to how I felt, and that usually worked for me. I just never liked the idea of wearing a heart rate monitor. I never liked running with someone who had it beeping all the time because they were going too hard. I remember guys ripping those things off mid run. And then there was, comments about how accurate it is. And it just was like, well, I'm doing well enough with the way that I run without worrying about my heart rate, and never really got into it. And as far
Mhm.
as running hard all the time, I mean, I would caution against that, because running hard all the time, if you're truly running hard, that's like racing all the time. If that's what you're doing, that's a little too aggressive, because you're actually not going to get faster if you're racing all the time. You're just going to keep running the same times over and over again.
Yeah, your body needs that rest.
Yeah, you need to do different paces. And like we were just talking about with the marathoning, you need to run faster in order to get that speed up for the marathon. Or if it's a 5K, same thing. Like you're going to have to tempo, you're going to have to do intervals. I mean, you don't have to, but I mean, if you want to get your best results, I would do tempos at a good pace. I would do interval training at a faster pace. I would do long runs. I would do regular everyday runs that are not real fast, but get me the distance and the mileage that I need. But the variation is what gets you better. And I know a lot of people who run a good amount of mileage, but they don't ever do workouts. They don't do tempo runs. They don't do interval training.
Yeah,
And they just go, well, I still run a 30-minute 5K. And I'm like, well, you run a 30-minute 5K because you have never done any other work. You just run,
right,
5 miles and then 3 miles and then 8 miles and then 5 miles and then 3 miles and then 8 miles. And then you go and race. Well, there's no tempo run, there's no interval, and your only speed workout is basically the race. Then you consider that a speed
right,
workout if you
right,
want to, but it's really just a race. Then it's not really a workout.
right.
And I know that when I started training after college for 5Ks, I felt better and better because I was tempoing and I was doing, fartleks and intervals, and it just whatever I felt like. I didn't even go with like a real strict regimen. I just went like, well, what do I feel like doing today? I would feel like doing mile repeats on the road. Okay, I'm gonna do mile repeats on the road. And I just felt awesome. Every time I'd go and race, I felt better and better and I'd run faster. Did I
Yeah.
answer the question at all? Did I
Yeah, I
answer
think
the
so.
question? I don't even
Um,
know.
yeah, I think you answered it.
It's
Yeah,
a good
I
question.
also have never really, it is a good question. It's a great question. I also have never really trained in heart rate zones for similar reasons. I tried it one time where I had a chest monitor and I found it very difficult. The accuracy wasn't great. It was really difficult to run hills. And where I live, there's a lot of hills. So like you'd be supposed to keep it in this zone for an easy run. As soon as you started up the hill, you're way out of your zone. And it's like, well, now what do I do? Walk up the hill? That seems ridiculous. So I never really did. But I will say this. The new watch I have has a very good heart rate monitor and it makes it very easy to see what zone you are in. And I have used it a little bit where if I'm particularly on a flat run, like if I'm supposed to be easy and I see that my heart rate is outside of the easy base zone, I will back off a little bit. Or if I'm supposed to be in that threshold zone, I'll pick it up a little bit. And I'm still going on pace, but I've been more conscious of the heart rate zone. I don't know. Like I said, I ran the fastest half marathon I've run since 2011. So it could be part of it. I don't know. But I was also looking back at stuff. I don't run as hard as I used to. So maybe that's why. I definitely take easy days easy anymore, where back in the day I did not.
I
So
think,
maybe that's more of it.
yeah, I think if you're really, for sure, if you're struggling with paces and knowing how fast to go, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. If
Yeah.
you're new to running, if you're trying to figure things out, if you run too hard, like if you think that's your problem, it's probably a good idea. Like if you're someone that's
Yeah.
going out and you're really hitting it every time and you're doing close to race pace, yeah, put it on maybe. And then that might
Yeah.
slow you down.
I mean, you probably do too, but I know some excellent runners that use heart rate, and I know excellent runners that don't. So I think it's like a lot of things we end up discussing here. It's preference. It's all preference.
There's billions of people, so you're not going to have the same routine. No matter what you're training for, amount of time to get to PRs, for example. Like if you took somebody that didn't run, right? And you said, okay, I'm going to give you 6 months to hit a PR after your first day of running, they're probably going to hit a PR because they haven't run. And these 6 months later, they're going to be running and feel better and be able to go faster, right?
First, they'd say, Coach, what's a PR?
Right.
Personal record.
But that's the thing. Like if you're new to it and you're working on things, you're going to learn a lot really quick, but it's going to take you years to get really good. So that's why you see people, all over YouTube posting that they ran like a 27 5K and now they're running like a 15:59 or something like that. Well,
Yeah.
they had potential, but they weren't in shape and they didn't train and they learned a lot and got a lot quicker and their body, handled it well and they've been dedicated to it because that's obviously dedication too. You don't just
Yeah.
drop a ton of time in your race because you ran a little bit. There's a lot of studying and a lot of commitment to get there. If you can get there,
Indeed.
because that's really fast.
Yeah. That's quick.
But I have noticed that if you study any elite runner, right, they
Hmm.
usually have a long history of running. Like by the time they get to that point where they're actually really
Yeah.
elite. Now we're not talking about like just a good high school kid that hit a good mile or 5K. We're not talking about a college kid that's came out set sophomore year or something like that and is running really well. I'm talking about like people that are like legit elite. They perform, they do well every single time they get out there. They're running against the best. There's a lot of years of running and consistency and training regiments and coaching and all kinds of things that go into that to get them that consistency where every time they get on the track or every time they get in a race they're running very consistent very well. They basically have the same kind of times over and over again. That takes a lot of effort. You know how it was when we were running in college. There was times where some people just wouldn't have a good day. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
some of them are running for what, 7, 8, 9 years, and all of a sudden they just didn't have a good day.
Yeah. It happens.
It is what it is. But they're very consistent. Otherwise, I think we should do a video we'll try to hit certain times, but not for the whole thing. Like
Yeah.
maybe if the jackal comes out, we can run
Yeah.
some fast quarters and halves and stuff and see what we can do.
I was telling my wife the other day, there's a lot of strategy to racing. Like everybody thinks like, oh, running is simple. You just go out and run. But there's if you're gonna race, there's a lot of strategy involved. I mean, it's just as simple as going out and putting one foot in front of the other.
Sometimes I
But
miss that running is just running and it's very easy.
the strategery.
It was really easy when it was just like you just go and run, and I don't know what I'm going to run. I don't know what's a good time. I don't know who's good. I don't know. I don't know anything. That ignorance was bliss for a while. Then all of a sudden you figure it out, and
Yeah.
you're like, wow. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Remember to like and share on Facebook, follow on Instagram, hit the support button, and help support the show. Thanks to those who have. Maverick and Wolfman running out. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional medical healthcare advice. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the hosts or the management.